On the podcast today, we are going to speak about chapter 62 of the Tao Te Ching, which makes up the 62nd episode of the 81 meditations on the Tao Te Ching. And as usual, Guyang will read Jia Fu Feng and Jane English's translation, and I will read Derek Lin's translation.
Tao is the source of the 10,000 things. It is the treasure of the good and the refuge of the bad. Sweet words can buy honor. Good deeds can gain respect. If people are bad, do not abandon them. Therefore, on the day the emperor is crowned, or the 3 officers of the state installed, do not send the gift of jade and a team of horses, but remain still and offer the Tao. Why does everyone value the Tao so much? Isn't it because you find what you seek and are forgiven when you sin? Therefore, this is the greatest treasure in the universe.
The Tao is the wonder of all things, the treasure of the kind person, the protection of the unkind person. Admirable words can win the public's respect. Admirable actions can improve people. Those who are unkind, how can they be abandoned? Therefore, when crowning the emperor and installing the 3 ministers, although there is the offering of jade before 4 horses, none of it can compare to being seated in this Tao. Why did the ancients value the Tao so much? Is it not said that those who seek will find, and those with guilt will not be faulted? Therefore, it is the greatest value in the world. So this chapter really hones in on Lao Tzu's idea that the Tao loves and nourishes all, but does not lord it over them. So you find in this chapter, and you find through many other chapters through the Tao Te Ching, that Taoism doesn't have a concept of sin. And so good and bad are looked at very differently within Taoism. And so that's why it is important to have compassion and acceptance within Taoism. And that's something that we need to cultivate as spiritual aspirants along the path.
Yes, good and the bad is just something as we perceive it, right? As a human, we give it value that's good or bad or right or wrong, and etc. But Taoistic perspective doesn't have such thing. It doesn't come from dualistic mindset. So that, of course, good or the bad or the same thing, basically. Just 2 opposite ends of the same thing. So from a Taoistic perspective, it's all part of the Tao, part of the universe. So there is no such judgment or given a quality of good is good or bad is bad or the other way around. So that it's really have that ultimate unconditional acceptance and such openness that's for us, everyone, really.
Yeah. If you're sincere about Taoism and other spiritual traditions, to be honest, like Buddhism and also Advaita Vedanta and these type of traditions, going beyond good and bad is a very important principle and practice to live by. And people probably will think, well, that sounds crazy, like particularly if you think about the world in moralistic terms. But Taoism is an amoral tradition for this fact because, first of all, as you're alluding to, whose subjective viewpoint of right and wrong, good and evil is the right one? Which one should we follow? Is it the President of the United States? Is it your local chaiwala down the street? Are you the person we should follow? Like, what is this perspective of right and wrong, good and evil? Whose should we follow, right? In Sanskrit, there's a term called drishti. Drishti means perspective, like a subjective perspective. And so in Advaita Vedanta, for example, drishti is something that we need to overcome and essentially cleanse out of our being. And so in Taoism, it's very similar because we have to overcome this idea of right and wrong, good and evil, etc. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a natural goodness in the world. And that's where Mencius teachings come in, right? Mencius has the teachings of fundamental goodness. Taoism has the teachings of fundamental goodness as well. We learn how to be bad in air quotes. We learn how to be evil in air quotes. Like that comes from a socialization process that we all have endured, right? We all were an innocent child once upon a time. And then society steps in, maybe our parents step in with certain ways of raising us and so forth and so on. Like, you're not going to get everything perfect and ideal. I think that a lot of people have these, especially in the spiritual community, have these idealistic versions of reality that could potentially take place. But that is not what the Tao is. Like everything is running its own course according to the nature of its existence. And we are all doing that as well as humans on the path. And so all of us are following our own path, and we don't know the life that we're going to live when we're brought into this world. And so then we're following this path, and we are accumulating this sense of identity as we go along, right? And so it's this sense of identity then that has this drishti, has this perspective of its own version of reality. This is right, this is wrong, etc., so forth and so on. But if we strip it back to Taoism and Mencius's teachings, obviously, if we use the child and the well analogy in the story, where Mencius says that if we were to see a child about to fall into a well, what would our natural response be? And that's his kind of example that we have this fundamental goodness, because we all would be compelled to try and make sure that young child doesn't fall down the well. And so there is this fundamental goodness. Like, we know that obviously killing is wrong. We know that harming someone else and harming yourself is not beneficial for yourself or anyone else, right? But we live in a world where some people are toxic, and they might gaslight you, they might treat you poorly. You can even get this through the closest people in your life. You might get it from your family, you might get it from your closest friends. And then it's not for you to try and work out why they treat you like that. This chapter is trying to teach you to have sort of that universal compassion as a spiritual practice, because not everyone's on the path. But the Tao does not judge. It always offers an equal plentitude, but usually it's only those with the eye to see that can sense the Tao in their life. Those who don't sense the Tao are continually fighting the river, and they continually complain about their life and wonder why their life is not going according to plan, in air quotes, when the Tao is always offering an opportunity to every single person on the planet to return to the source.
Yes. What's really important is to bring that principles of Taoism into your own life. Take it to your own self, and then try to abide by it and try to practice it in your everyday life. Not to try to project on other people and you expect them to behave in a certain way, like, a Taoistic, a natural way. It doesn't work like that. You cannot change. We cannot change other people, obviously.
No.
And again, we know that ultimately the right and wrong, good or bad, are coming from the very relative idea. You mentioned that idealistic world of like what's good or what's the diminishing completely what's bad and this and that. But like a good by who? Like good. What's good by what kind of perspective that is. Again, it's always going to be relative. Good or bad, right or wrong, is never can be solid and concrete all the time. We know it changes all the time. So even justice system, or even just things that are going on these days with the narrative and this and that. What was bad 10 years ago, what's good now? And the other way around. So things always change and things are relative. So nothing is absolute. So that is what this chapter is trying to send a message out of how things always change. And again, like when you mentioned with the Mencius, that natural goodness is something that you shouldn't actually put it on the category of good or bad sort of a way of thinking, because in Hindu ethics, for example, practicing morality as in like an ethical point of view, that for yourself, but largely also for your community and society. And people think that this is something that I have to practice to harmonize my mind and this and that. But it's more so to purify your own consciousness. And that obviously has an effect on other people and community and society. So, and again, people think that something that you have to practice very strictly, you need to really like follow by very hardcore. But again, if you want to put it the other way around, enlightened person or liberated person do not go out and kill someone.
No.
Right? So what is natural is fundamentally good to all of us. So in Hindu principle, in Hindu discipline, it's more like, okay, our nature can get warped by conditioning, education, and our upbringing and whatnot. So that ethics and morality is like a tool to purify our mind. So bring back to our natural state of consciousness. So, and that obviously will benefit yourself and the others. And again, fundamentally, enlightened person do not act out of ethical spectrum. So that's the point. So that natural goodness is what's fundamentally right to all of us as a human.
Yeah, the enlightened sage doesn't need a set of morals,
No.
a set of ethics, because they are naturally moralistic, naturally ethical. And it's, as you said earlier, it's very easy actually to follow that naturalness that we have. That's what Zidran is, part of what Zidran is also in Taoism, like self-so nature, or like spontaneously of itself. It's so natural and easy to be good. Right, like, so it's easy to smile at someone. It's easy to, care for someone. It's a lot harder if you're walking down the street and you're frowning at everyone, and you're doing these ones, and people will be like, "Ooh, he's lost his mind." But it's harder to be an a-hole. It's harder to be a prick. It's a lot easier just to be an average good person. Like humility, compassion, acceptance, all of these things come very easy. Anger, violence, gaslighting someone, these are very difficult to follow, and you incur so much karma on yourself from behaving like that. It's not to say that anger doesn't exist or is something that you need to overcome, but once it turns into aggression and violence, that's when it becomes problematic. People don't have the awareness to be aware of their anger and try to understand it, be intimate with that anger. Instead, people just project it onto other people, and sometimes you're just doing nothing, and then someone vents on you, and you're thinking like, did I do something wrong? Like, what is going on here? But that, again, comes from people not being conscious of their own inner landscape and just allowing their inner landscape to run wild. And so we've just got to come back to that simplicity of sort of those natural moral virtues, like humility, forgiveness, compassion, acceptance. These things are so easy for us to follow, that in this chapter it says that that's sort of like what we need to double down on, because we need to understand as spiritual aspirants that not everyone understands what the Tao is. They don't even know the Tao exists. They don't understand that the ultimate reality is what's driving their life.
Yes.
So we used to live in cultures in previous times where we were cognizant of that. And it was in the community, no matter what sort of spiritual tradition or religion it was. That was more of the focus. But then as we split off into this sort of this rational world where religion and science split off, then you've got this world that's very materialistic. Everything's about the money we have, the possessions we have, and nothing is about spirituality, the essence of our very being.
Yes.
And if we look at it from the Hindu perspective, this is what would be called the Kali Yuga, and so the devolution into matter. So people's love of AI, people's love of technology, love of money, gold chains, whatever floats your boat, right? And so that's a moving into materialism. And so this chapter is saying that we need to reverse that gaze, come back within. And that's why actually the Taoist sages don't need anything, because they understand, as this chapter says, that that's the greatest value in the world. You could pit a Lamborghini against the Tao. If anyone said the Lamborghini was worth more than the Tao, then they just don't understand what the Tao is.
Yeah, without the Tao, there is no Lamborghini. Yeah.
That's the fact,
Yeah.
right? And so we need to return our gaze within and understand the source. And say if we are in the Kali Yuga, that means we are still going to go on a process of devolution, but there are always those people who are seeking the spiritual truth, no matter what age that is. And maybe that's the people listening and watching our podcast.
Yes. Yes. Anything that are going further away from our naturalness is going to only become toxic to all of us, or like as in an emotion, for instance, as you mentioned, anger and anger and fear and like a hatred and this kind of feelings. These sort of emotions are very exhausting. It exhausts you. Like I think we all have experienced this. If you're very angry about something or at someone, after a while you kind of realize that you spend so much energy just to be angry, to stay angry, right? And the hatred is the same. But for some reason, some people like to carry those feelings. But often that kind of feeling becomes the foundation of going depressed, right? So as you mentioned, that if you do natural things to ourselves that are much easier for us because it doesn't exhaust much energy, because that's just how we are. We are compassionate. Naturally, we care for others, and we naturally love others and share things with others, and you feel good for yourself as well. So that's how the natural feeling arises.
That's right. Most of us wake up every day and we just want to have fun and live a joyful life. But things happen throughout our day, and then, if we use the internet, for example, I'm not sure that anyone wakes up and they say, I want to be a troll and all I'm going to do today is troll online. I think that it slowly happens over the day where they see something that maybe annoys their subjective perspective of the world, so they have to throw their 2 cents in as if that matters. They overestimate themselves again. But I don't think anyone really wakes up in the day and goes, I want to hate today. I want to cause as much drama as possible. I don't think that anyone would ever think like that. Even tyrannical rulers, I don't think they wake up and think, I just want to cause chaos today. It's usually circumstantial, right?
Yes.
Why those sorts of things happen. And again, their subjective viewpoint is in the way, but again, it's part of circumstances. And so most of us have an impulse for peace, love, compassion, joy. It's natural to us.
Yes.
We don't want to fight. Like, who wants to fight? Who wants to argue? It takes too much energy.
Yes. Yeah, so, as you mentioned with the Kali Yuga, we are going into the Kali Yuga, and apparently some people believe we exited the Kali Yuga, but I don't think that is actually the truth. We are still descending into the Kali Yuga. So
Only at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you think we're not in the Kali Yuga, then why are suicide rates, mental health disorders, depression, and that at an all-time high and exponentially growing?
Yes.
You'd have to be pretty sick if you think that that's a healthy society. And it doesn't matter what self-claimed guru says that we're not in the Kali Yuga. If you go by the scriptures where the Kali Yuga is from, the Puranas, then we're only at the beginning. Now, does that mean that that's the end of the world? No, it just means it's a season, it's a cycle.
Yes.
It's like the winter of the yugas. It's cold.
Yeah, things are dying.
Things are dying. Yeah, that's right. And so it's important to have spiritual nourishment through that time.
Yes.
And even the story of Vyasa, when he left the scriptures behind, it was because he understood that in dark times, there are going to be people who have a spiritual orientation that need nourishment. And thank God for sages like him and Lao Tzu, because Lao Tzu left this behind for future generations, inadvertently, because he is a Taoist. Nothing is ever contrived, but it just happened that way.
Yes. Yeah, according to Yuga cycle, in a way, this Kali Yuga that we are going through can give us some sort of justification that what's happening, right? At the same time that we love technology and people highly talk over AI and whatnot, and heavily going into materialistic centered mentality. And that is actually clear proof of that we are going into Kali Yuga, and doesn't look like is going the other way. We are not turning just yet. We are keep going that way, so that it seems like going to get worse, and then it is descending. But that doesn't give us any kind of justification. It's more so give us indication that we are going through these cycles, and our ancestors have left all this great knowledge for us to see, so that the cycle is going around. What is descended is going up. So, yeah, again, the people who are aware of the knowledge and who sincerely following, make a very good use of all this great knowledge, so that we can become like a help for this time of Kali Yuga and for others as well.
Yes. So just ask yourself this question: if you don't believe we're in the Kali Yuga, this is the premise of the Satya Yuga, the Golden Age. The premise is that you have far less possessions, life is peaceful, and the focus of an individual and a family's life is based on three things: food, clothing, and shelter, and that's all you need. You don't need your car. You don't need this or that. Now ask yourself, are we living in that reality? So there you go. Because in Satya Yuga, the focus is God consciousness, is Brahman, is Tao. Now, is that the focus of life in the modern day? Ask yourself that question. Obviously not. Money is king, materialism king, status is king, everything is king, over and above Brahman and Tao. First of all, most people don't even know those terms, and they'll equate that with a creator God, like in Christianity. But Brahman and God obviously supersede the idea of a creator God, because creator God is intermingling with human affairs.
Yes.
Where Brahman and Tao are undifferentiated pure consciousness. And that's what we are at our core as well. And that's what this chapter actually reverts back to, isn't it? Like, that's what the greatest wonder of all is that
yes,
the Tao is this undifferentiated, pure, non-dual consciousness, and that's at the heart of all of our existence.
That's
and
right.
it's like, how can we forget that? But we walk around every day forgetting that that's our nature.
yes. We have to remember it now.
We have to remember it,
Yes,
right? We have to go
yeah.
through a process of remembering.
Yeah, the pure consciousness itself is the innate essence of all of us, and that is unconditionally compassionate and have lots of empathy and acceptance. And again, sounds a bit cliche, but it is pure love. That's it. And again, what this pure consciousness, self-luminous, what does that mean? If your mind is not corrupted, if your mind is not impure, if your mind is crystal clear, like just clean water stream, then it'll just shine itself. And that is within all of us, and that is our true nature. So, yes, we need to remember it.
Yeah, we do need to remember it. And that's a great point, because that unconditional love, like what Lao Tzu's mentioning in this chapter, is that, as we've kind of been discussing, is no matter what people do to you, no matter the negative projection you have of someone, the practice for us is to have that unconditional love. Understand that they are at a certain level of their existence. I remember William Walker Atkinson had as his pseudonym was Yogi Ramacharaka, and in one of his great books, The Advanced Teachings of Yoga, the first part, he spoke a lot about this, saying that you need to cultivate this unconditional compassion, unconditional love, because you need to fundamentally realize that when you look at someone and you see them, they're only at a certain level of development on their journey through these infinite lives that we live until we attain moksha. And so who is it for us to judge them?
Yes.
Because they're exactly where they need to be. But we're judging them because we're based on our own conditioning. And look, to be fair, some people do hurt people unintentionally. People are toxic. I get it. We've all been around that,
Yes.
no matter whether it's family or friends. But you also have to take a step back and reflect, because your practice is higher than anything, to have that love and acceptance and to understand that, look, that's just where they are, and what can I do about it?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, like keep distance from the drishti, the subjective perspective. That's very important, that you keep a little bit of distance from your own perspective, because we know that's not the absolute.
That's not the absolute perspective. That's right. The absolute perspective is Tao, and who are we to argue with it?
Yeah, no, we're nobody. We're just jivas just running around, and yes.
That's right. So that's just for you, everyone to think about. Remember that, as Guy said, that drishti, our perspective is what's going around the world, judging the world. But if we are to emulate the Taoist sage, if we are to emulate the Tao loves and nourishes all but does not lord it over them. And so it has a reserved judgment. It does not judge everything according to its drishti. So guys, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next time.